Hey everybody, what's going on? I'm Maslon Hedgevani, joined by managing editor of Warchant.com, Ira Schoffel. Warchant.com is your ultimate Seminole sports source. Promo code is at the bottom of your screen. It's Warchant30. Lower right corner underneath Ira is a subscribe button to our YouTube channel. Do that. It's free. Hit the little bell, set your notifications, however often or infrequently you want to be reminded when these videos drop. And of course, hit that thumbs up button. We certainly would appreciate it. It helps bring the video to the forefront. Let a lot of Florida State fans know that we're out here, we exist, and we're talking about the Noles. This exit interview series, your brainchild, Ira. Mortal men would have simply bundled up the receivers and tight ends into a pass catcher segment, much like defensive tackles and ends into a defensive line segment. But you're the immortal Ira Schoffel. So here to talk about tight ends, Ira. This position, huh? This is going to be a focal point, perhaps.
Well, I mean, look, if you're going to do a tight end preview, Mike Norvell's offense is the one you want to do it with because he does. It is an emphasis. It wasn't so much necessarily last year. Cameron McDonald was FSU's only real legitimate pass catching threat with 23 receptions. Preston Daniel did have a big one, big catch, about a 40-yarder. But for the most part, it was pretty much the Cameron McDonald show. This year could be different, though. And we know from looking at what Mike Norvell did at his previous stops, he likes to use the tight ends in a lot of different ways. And they actually have a lot of different tight ends now. So it's definitely worth, I think, breaking them out.
What sort of depth chart are we looking at here? Is it Cam McDonald, do you think, and then a pretty big gap between 2, 3, and whomever else? Or do you think by the time we get back out there and are able to watch practice, we'll see maybe a bit of a closing in that sort of gap? Or did it ever even exist, a gap between Cam and the guy?
Yeah, there's definitely a gap. I mean, I think this is probably the one position as much as anything, other than maybe Jermaine Johnson and I don't know, Andrew Parchment. Well, he's got to prove himself. So pretty much it's one of the very, very few positions where Cameron McDonald's going to be the starter unless he just has a terrible offseason, something happens. But, he was the starter last year, played pretty well. He wasn't like he's an All-American coming back, but he's, clearly did a solid job last year. And really, there's a lot of question marks about some other guys, but at least they do have a lot of options. I think the one that is the most likely choice, assuming he's healthy and assuming he can revert to some of the form he showed when he was at UCLA, is Jordan Wilson. He came in last year as a grad transfer, very good blocker, much big physical guys, about 6'4", 260 something. Real physical guy, can catch passes as well, but I think he's your top blocking tight end. And then Preston Daniel was the guy that came out of nowhere last year as a true freshman walk-on, and actually was a lot of times was their second tight end in 2 tight end sets. As I said, he had that long catch in the North Carolina game. And so, I mean, he's had some real big contributions as a true freshman walk-on. You would assume that this year, after being in the strength and conditioning program for a full year, he might be a little bit more athletic. And then after that, there's a lot of other guys that I think have some potential, but have really never done a whole lot in terms of college football.
Do we think the blocking tight end is going to be a difference maker in this offense?
I think it will. I mean, you think about how much they want to run the football, and you look at at least the Pro Football Focus grades for Cameron McDonald. His pass blocking grades weren't bad. Same Preston Daniels weren't bad either, especially for a freshman. But the run blocking grades were not very good, and so I think that could be a real positive. Jordan obviously is a big, strong kid. We have to see if he's totally. I assume he'll be totally healthy, based on the way we saw him running around in the spring. He wasn't doing contact drills, but he was running around. And Cam McDonald, you got to give him credit. He's put on, I think, at least about 20 pounds since last season. He's put on 40 pounds since he signed with FSU. So he should be more equipped to block. But I think also, I think he's going to go, or Jordan Wilson, I think, will help in that regard. And then Jackson West, true freshman in the spring. I mean, the way they talked him up and some of the stuff we saw him doing in some blocking drills, where he certainly wasn't afraid to stick his nose in there. So I think that's going to be another part of it. It's not like they're going to necessarily be the point of attack on all these running plays, but if you have that at least as a threat, then teams have to respect you in that area, and then you can take advantage of them in the passing game.
I certainly would like to see Cam McDonald. It's not his marketing, but the marketing of fans of him being a matchup nightmare and him just being a wide receiver and a tight end's body. We'd like to see that kind of come to fruition, because that would obviously be a game changer for an offense that's lacking pass catchers until we see Andrew Parchment perhaps come on the scene and improve his mettle and show that what made him a Big 12 selection. What are your last thoughts, I guess, on the tight end position as we wrap things up, Ira?
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, I think that Cameron McDonald came in as a 4-star recruit. 23 catches is a decent number, especially in 9 games. But I wouldn't necessarily say he was a guy that changed football games. I mean, you look at some of the tight ends around the country that have had just tremendous impacts, and we know they would like to do that as well. So I would have to imagine he's going into his 4th year at Florida State. I imagine he's not necessarily dying to stay at school for another year or 2 after that, even though he possibly could. And I think, he'll be, there'll be a lot of challenging of him this offseason to step up and not just be a decent tight end, but to be a big weapon and a guy who can, kind of change games. There's a couple other, wild cards. I think, they walk-ons, Austin White and I think DJ Daniels showed some ability in the spring as well. And then, you got Wyatt Rector, who made the transition from quarterback to tight end last year. So he's got another year in the system. You have the true freshman from last year, Marquise Douglas and Carter Boatwright, who redshirted. Maybe you see something out of them this year. So they have a lot of guys, and they have 7, 8, 9 guys at that position. So that should foster that competition. And you'd like to see, especially Jordan Wilson coming back, that maybe elevate Cameron McDonald's ability to performance to the level you talked about, because we've seen it with whether it's Kyle Pitts or different tight ends around the country. That can have a huge impact on your offense, and he's got the ability. We know he thinks he's that kind of player. This will be a good season to show it.
I mean, look at this, man. Rector, Daniels, not even going to try to pronounce Ben's last name. Preston Daniel. You forgot my boy David Stickle. Don't forget David Stickle. Remember the name. Carter Boatwright, Jackson West, Austin White, Marquise Douglas, Cameron McDonald. They have plenty of options. And you folks do as well, and we appreciate you picking Warchant.com. What's next on deck for us here, Ira, is the offseason? I don't know if we're moving into the teeth of it, or are we seeing light at the end of the tunnel in the offseason?
We're going to transition a little bit. We've still got more of these position things we'll be doing, moving over to defense. Oh, and real quick, Ben Ostaszewski, got to shout out to the Ostaszewski family. It's a proud tradition.
Yeah, good luck.
Joe and Henry at Florida State as well. But and then really in a couple weeks, we're going to start really focusing on these recruiting camps and visits that are going to be starting up in June. Michael and Austin are going to be previewing a lot of those visits. We'll also have some more look at how they're preparing for, what should be a huge June for recruiting. Kids haven't been able to visit campuses. They haven't been able to do any in-person recruiting since March of 2020. So it's been about 15 months, and it's all going to get going in June. So we'll start ramping up that coverage next week.
Yeah, June 1st, they'll be in the weight room too here on campus, we hope. So another thing to look forward to. All right. Check everything out over at warchant.com. Nice charts, full write-up from Ira on this subject. Much more easily digestible than this 8-minute video. Just watch. Not that this was bad or anything, but reading is a lot quicker and easier. But hey, we give you all the options you want. He's Ira. I'm Aslan. Thanks for watching, everybody.